Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping on. My name is Ransom Onyema. I'm a fourth year radiography student and also a medical writer and also YouTuber. So today I have an amazing guest speaker. I'll leave the platform for her to introduce herself to the audience so the guests can, get to know her more. So, Rad, Ifeadikachi, could you introduce yourself to the audience? Thank you.
Well, the name is Ifeadikachi Iweadinobi. I am a mom before an erratic, and I am currently practicing in Canada. Um, I am an MRI technologist, and I'm also trying to help a lot of people who are international applicants that wants to work in Canada as a diagnostic technologist with regards to radiation. Um, Basically, that's what I do, and I do it because someone helped me get to this point. So that's the only way I feel I can give back to society. So yes, the people who know
Amazing.
me call me Ify, but I'm always able to help if anyone needs my attention.
Amazing. So, Ify, right, right. So you
That's
have
correct.
yeah, you have a couple of questions for you to answer. You ready?
Oh, sure, sure.
All right. So the first question is, what led you to specialize in MRI safety, and how did you become an MRSO? Talk us there.
Well, I so first of all, I need to give you a little bit background story. I started my journey as a radiation technologist back then in Africa, Nigeria to be precise, and I had fewer challenges because I was betting and I was in school. So I did have challenges back then in Africa, but I was very resilient because I knew I needed to graduate. This was a field that I have always been passionate about. But then after I graduated as an X-ray tech, a part of me kept yearning for more. I mean, I'm still that way. I'm always getting like certifications and stuff. So a part of me was a little bit uncomfortable with just being an X-ray tech, and I delved into MRI. I did a little bit of ultrasound and CT, and then I delved into MRI. And it was because I saw how much MRI was able to, impact the healthcare system with coming up with ideologies that were so broad that a patient could get diagnosed properly, start getting treatments without undergoing any invasive procedure. So that was kind of very alluring to me. So I went ahead to study MRI. And then after I studied MRI, it became evident that more information are needed. It wasn't just enough to be an MRI technologist because when I started practicing, I noticed there were some implants I was always scared of. There were so many things that I just couldn't wrap my fingers around. And I'm like, something is not adding up somewhere. So I did my research. I knew I needed to, for my own comfort at first. That was what I went for the MRSO thingy, for my own comfort at first. And when I went for the course and I took the course and wrote the exam, I felt like my search has actually ended at that point. Not with regards to the other things I want to do, but I found peace in my mind. Like when I'm interacting with my patients, what if something happens? How am I able to, be of help to my patient? And also, one of my other motivation was a colleague of mine. She is an MRSO, and there are some crazy implants that will present themselves in the hospital, and every single one of us would be at on edge, like not to almost. I don't know how to put this, but I got motivated because she was always like, "Go, go, go! I'm gonna do it." And then the other thing that broke the camel's back that made me say, "You know what? I'm definitely gonna do this," was when I saw one of my colleagues turn a patient back. A patient was denied care because of a sudden implant that the both of us could not properly identify. So that was it. I said, not under my watch would somebody be denied care again over something that I could have done maybe 2 or 3 minutes research on with regards of my status as an MRO. So these were the things that actually made me go for it. And I would do it again if the opportunity presents itself, because I find peace interacting with the public since I know the dangers that could occur and what I can do to secure their lives.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for talking us through on how what really led you to specialize in MRI safety, and how you became an MRI SO. So it's amazing to also hear that you feel peaceful with your status. Amazing, and your because one of my courses I studied in radiography psychology. In radiography talks about majorly about the patients and communication with the patient. So it's
Yeah.
amazing that you're flowing with the patient, getting to know their wants and all that. So which is amazing. So thank you so much, Rad Ify, for talking us through. So the next question for you is, can you share some of the key MRI safety protocols you follow and why they are so critical to patient and staff safety in general? Talk us through.
Okay. First of all, I would mention that every MRI technologist needs to know the importance of identifying a patient properly before even starting with the screening. So the key, the number one, is to identify your patient. Identify them with their name, their date of birth, and if they have like health insurance and all that, you can also verify more. But the most important one is to identify them with their name and their date of birth. That's the most important one. Then, secondly, you have to screen your patients. Even if your colleague says, "Oh, I've screened this patient already," it is your duty as an MRI technologist to screen this patient, especially if you were not there when the screening was initially done. These are just the few first steps. And then there are so many organizations or facilities where patients are being allowed to undergo an MRI on their street clothes. And these are safety hazards, because if a patient is on a street clothes, there are times when we don't even know the materials that are used in making these clothes. The hospital clothings, 100% we can assure that they are MRI safe. But a patient shows up to the hospital and the patient is like wearing a street clothes, maybe a sports brand, could be anything. And they probably didn't even know that they had something left in the clothes. And then you're saying, "Do you have anything attached to your body or something?" And they're like, "No, nothing." And then you go ahead to scan them and you are seeing these crazy artifacts. Chances are you are degrading the quality of the image, which is also probably going to degrade the quality of the decision that the radiologist will make on that patient. These are my first few simple safety, you know, um, programs that I would normally undergo on every patient that comes to my unit. But the most one that we are so scared of is projectiles. I have had to see a patient come into the unit, change into the hospital gown. No, they didn't change. I remember this patient didn't change. I remember this story very well because it was a recent study, something that happened. This patient had presented themselves, but apparently they had a pant under, and there were loonies in the. When I say loonies, I mean like coins, and in his pants. And he had walked into the MRI room. It wasn't really something very life threatening, but it could have been, because again, this patient came in and then the coins came flying out of their pants. And then, yes, it did not hurt anybody, but it could have hurt somebody. So projectiles are the most ones that I'm very conscious about. And then we also have RF bonds. I think this is what somebody will get to understand more as they get deeper into MRI, where a patient presents themselves with maybe their body habitus is like quite on the big side, and then somebody just gets them into the scanner and their body is touching the balls of the magnet. There could be a situation of burn. It doesn't happen all the time, but it could happen to the patient. Also, you have patients who get in and they cross their hands or they cross their legs. There could be a loop kind of burn, like that one we call it a loop burn. Then the ones that their body is touching the site of the magnet, we call it like proximity. No, it's not proximity. Proximity burn has to do with the patient getting burnt because you're using a certain kind of coil and a body part is closer to that coil, but not within the scan field of view. That could also, there are times when patient presents with burns, especially if they have an implant, but that's not the area that is being scanned, but the patient is close, the coil is close to where the implant is. So there are just too many safety hazards in MRI that you need to be very careful of if you're going into that field. But these are the few ones I can talk about. Then the other thing is a patient who probably is on the big side and the patient is getting an MRI done, and you as an MRI tech is not being too careful to check if the fans are even on or if the room is, the temperature is enough. And then this patient is sweating profusely. There are patients who, of course, when they're sweating that way, is the body trying to cool them down in its own way. But it could get to a point that if the body cannot handle this patient can go into a medical emergency just because they are within the field that they are not their body is not comfortable to be in. So as an MRI tech, there is just a lot for you to look out for. The other safety hazard, which is more of a medical aspect, is with regards to contrast. Like we have three groups of contrast. We have 1, 2, 3. The group 2 contrasts are usually tagged safer, but there are countries or regions where people just get maybe group 1 contrast. In the US and in Canada, we are mostly using group 2, but there are countries where people are not very conversant with the groupings of these contrasts, and a patient that has maybe a renal malfunction that was not identified during the screening gets this contrast, and it could lead to NSF. So there are just too many. There are too many safety hazards that are, that are within MRI, and that is the reason why when somebody tells me they want to go into MRI, I like veto this person and I say, hey, there's a lot for you to learn.
Wow. I was intrigued about you talking about the contrast talks you made there, because there are some patients there that reacts to different kinds of contrast. So it's left for you to identify the one that the patient doesn't really react to, because there are different types of contrast medias using for usage for radiological examinations, and these are amazing key MRI safety protocols that you shared right there, right, Ife, and they're so critical as well to patients. So I believe that this has become an eye opening for audience as well, who are looking forward to going for an MRI checkups and all that. You need to abide to these critical protocols that Rad Ify talked about. So thank you so much for telling us through about that. So the next question for you is, so talk us through, how has MRI technology evolved over the years, and which advances do you believe had the greatest impact on patient care? Talk us through.
Well, when we talk about evolution, we probably need to start from where MRI started. I think the guy's name was Paul Luderberg or something. Some years ago, he actually had an MRI screening done on a zero point zero 0.09 Tesla. So evolution, I will get to where we are as of 2019. We have an MRI magnetic field strength of 11 Tesla, something about that, about 11 Tesla right now. But those ones are actually not for human use; they are usually for research purposes. So the field strength has evolved over the years. Like recently we're doing 1.5, 3T. I think FDA, was it FDA? One of the monitoring organizations, it's not FDA, I think it's ASTM, yeah, has approved. I'm not 100% sure of this particular information, but I think for the human use, MRI machine can go up to like 7 Tesla. But again, I need to confirm that information, but I think that's what is available right now. So, but then we have gone up to as high as 11 Tesla. And that's great because the difference from a zero point 0.9 to an 11 Tesla or even a 1.5 Tesla is there is improvement of spatial resolution, SNR, CNR, temporal resolution, scan time, things like that. There is quite an improvement. What would take a 1.5 Tesla 3 minutes to scan would take a 3T Tesla maybe about 2 minutes, few seconds to scan. And then just imagine what it will take a 7 Tesla to scan. So those upgrades are actually right now happening. And then I would also talk about image quality. Like I mentioned, you can compare the image quality between a 1.5 to a 3T. Although there are cases where we just go for a 1.5 against a 3T. For instance, when a patient has ascites or when a patient has a metallic implant or something, of course, with matters, a stronger magnet to produce more artifacts. And so if you're going from a 1.5 to a 3T, you're advised to go down to a 1.5 because the artifacts will still be there, but they won't be so pronounced like a 3T would do. So yes, you have to balance what you really want. And then we also talk about things like in my hospital, we do like a research where we get patients to lie down, assume themselves to be walking, or so MRI has evolved to a state of assessing brain function without invasive procedures. So a patient is just lying down in the MRI scanner, and we can assess the brain function. We can see how the brain communicates. When a patient is walking, when a patient is sleeping, when a patient is scared. Things like that. Because that research is really fantastic. When I got to see it, I was wowed. And the other thing I'll talk about is with regards to how do I put this? I'm trying to put this in a term that it will fit in. With contrast, that's what I'm trying to say, because again, it's not applicable to all the facilities that exist here. But with contrast, I would say MRI has evolved to a certain level. But I don't know if this has to do with the equipment, but it is done using MRI. Like Galovis is a group 2 contrast and it's non-conforming. So recently, we started giving contrast to patients whose EGFR are below 30. We do have to get a permission from the radiologist, but these were things that were not happening before, and recently patients who have never reacted to contrast, or even, how patients will come for MRI and they're getting abdominal studies and they're going to get contrast, and then you're saying, hey, not abdominal studies. When a patient comes for an MRI and patient is supposed to have like contrast study done, say for the brain, and this patient is advised not to eat because they could get nauseous. Those things has been ruled out right now. Again, not a facility practices this, but I'm just saying from my own perspective, this is an improvement from what it used to be before, where care could be denied a patient because they ate 4 hours to get an MRI procedure. If it is not an abdominal study that needs the bowels to be clean, the patient can present for their MRI even after eating. Like they could have just eaten like 1 hour or 20 minutes ago, and they still get their contrast and they are fine. Again, it's because we have come to realize that nausea is not an allergic reaction to contrast. It is non-allergic reaction to contrast. So if somebody is nauseous after they get a contrast, probably the person could get nauseous like from eating something else. So these improvements are actually quite impressive, So I don't have to deny a patient care. The doctor gets to make informed decision almost immediately when a patient needs that decision to be made. So that really gladdens my heart, honestly. So yeah, these are a few things I would just top of my head talk about.
Amazing, amazing. I'm so wowed right now about the new technology we talked about. Two
Yeah,
things.
I also didn't mention there was something we recently got in my hospital. It's called Deep
Okay.
Resolve Boost. It's from Siemens. Oh geez, I'm not advertising for Siemens right now. But it is a product, it's a software from Siemens that reduces the scan time, especially for extremities. I was wow to see that we could use it for pelvis, we could use it for hips, we could use it for. I even heard recently that it could be used for the brain. I'm not 100% sure of the brain aspect, but we were using it for shoulder, we we're using it for knee, we were using it for what else were we using it? Basically, MSKs. Normally, it takes about 20 minutes to get shoulder joint scan. But with that DRB, we were scanning shoulder joints for 5, 6 minutes. Can you imagine the difference? So the software upgrades, I mean, it makes MRI quite exciting and interesting. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Kudos to that company. They're really doing amazing well. But I love the fact you mentioned about the technology that enhanced about eating. Eating doesn't really affect that technology, because
Yeah.
it's still paramount here in Nigeria. Because where I do my clinical rotations, they give us, that, don't eat the next 4 hours your, you know, for your MRI procedures. And if the patient waited, maybe the patient waiting time was longer than she expected, the patient had to just go eat one or two things, and after examination, we booked her for another session. And I'm glad to hear that that has been phased, and I'm hoping that Nigeria will adapt to that new technology. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Rad, Ethan, for talking us through on how MRI technology has evolved over the years, and the advances that you believe that has some greatest impact, especially on patient care. So thank you so much for talking us through about that. So that draws us to the next question for you. So, what are the most common safety challenges or misunderstandings you have encountered in MRI, and how are they addressed? Talk us through.
Safety standard. I think I'll go back to the first thing I said the other time. It is with patients giving you a false information. For instance, a patient who really, really wants their MRI done can actually tell you a lie about an implant. And you can't check up the previous imagings of your patient. If the patient is talking, coordinated, can answer their own medical history, it doesn't make sense for you to just go and say, oh, you know what, I need to check all your previous histories and all that. Again, I think some administrative um, personnel should be able to do that when booking this patient for their MRIs. But then again, if this patient is standing right in your face and they have told the administrative personnel prior to coming for their MRI that they do not have an implant, and then they show up and they have an implant, but you do not know about it. It's happened few times, not just to me, to most MRI techs. And then you get this patient into the scanner and you find out that this patient has something. I think we've had a situation where there was somebody that had something in his groin area. It was an MRI of the pelvis. Thank goodness that scan was done in a 1.5, because that was a dangerous place to have an implant, and your caregiver isn't aware of what kind of implant it is. Again, there are so many clinics that still perform surgeries with MRI unsafe steel or unsafe medical steel. I don't know how to put it. And this patient could present for an MRI and it could dislodge. I've I've had a patient show up for an MRI. It was a lady, and she was screened by a certain tech. And that's why I still insist that even if a technologist has screened a patient and you're taking over from that tech, please screen that patient again respectfully. Explain to them why you have to do what you're doing. So I saw this interaction happen. I could vouch that this woman said that there was no implant. Her son came suddenly to give something. She was coming for a cardiac MRI, and she was previously booked for that cardiac MRI, but something happened before she showed up for her MRI, and the EMS took her to the hospital, and I guess she got a pacemaker implanted. So she showed up for an MRI on the day that she was actually supposed to get her MRI done, and she gave a false information that she does not have any implants. Somehow, however God made this happen, this is beyond human understanding. The tech that actually screened her, to which I witnessed the screening, had left to go do something. And the other tech came to take over that study. I had left as well. And this tech rescreened this patient. We were in the staff room while he was rescreening this patient. The woman's son walked in. And then the tech got to the point of, have you ever had any implant in your heart? And she said, no, I told the other person, why are you guys asking me these questions again? Just do my MRI. I've been waiting for this long. And the son said, no, mom, you had a pacemaker implanted. And the tech almost fainted at that point. Because, yes, in Canada, in the hospital that I was then, because I no longer work there, you can scan a pacemaker, but it has to be in MRI mode. And we have a team that does that. Now, this patient would have gone into an MRI without her pacemaker being put in an MRI mode. So this tech ran back to the staff room where we were and said, can you guys believe what just happened to me? Now, this is not the first, this is not the second, this keeps happening. So my biggest fear is my patient telling me a lie because they want this MRI done. I don't know if that's applicable in Africa because people pay for their MRIs, so they're going to be very careful. But here, the government covers people for MRIs. So some people could be on a waiting list for a long time. And once they have the opportunity to get the MRI done, they don't care about the consequences of their stories. They don't care about what they're saying, if it is going to hurt them. They are just going to tell you anything they feel you would like to hear just to get your MRI done. So to me, this is my biggest fear. The other one is there has been situations where people have had CT contrast reaction, which is a red flag for a patient getting an MRI contrast. If somebody had reacted to a CT contrast, the person has the probability of reacting to an MRI contrast. But then this patient presents, have you ever had a contrast done? No. Have you ever had a CT contrast done? No. And your instinct is telling you that this no is not coming out properly. And then you go back to check this person's information and you see they've had a CT and they had a very bad reaction. And this person doesn't even have a recent blood work for you to actually present this case to the radiologist and get their approval for this patient to be scanned with contrast. So it's beyond me how these things happen because life is at stake here, but these people are not conscious. They are not even aware of how much you are willing to save them, even while trying to give them care, you know. So this has been my I would say my major safety fear, or I don't know, however you put it. So that's what I would say with that regard.
Wow. I don't want to digress further. I think you really
No, you
touched
can go
a lot
ahead
of
and do that. Like if you have more questions than this, I'll take it.
you know. Well, that's really applicable in Africa. It's been a long time you've been in Africa, so um, about the safety challenges and misunderstandings we've encountered with my little understanding about, when I was rotated, I had the opportunity to leave the extra room, to move into the MRI room to see what's really happening. And I saw a lot of, like, the first time you talked about lying, I think is really paramount here in Africa. A lot of patients don't really go straight to the point. They're not straight in terms of telling us what is applicable, and prior when you talked about checking that information, I think that's what really helps, radiographers here in Nigeria to checkmate if the patient have done this or done that something. So I think
Yeah, and
patients need to be a little,
yeah,
open to.
let me also add, when
Okay.
people are not feeling well, there are stages of grief when they get an information of what is going on in their lives. And most times they are within the second stage, which is like anger, because at first they deny, and then the second stage is anger. A patient might be presenting to you within their second stage, right? And questioning them can be very annoying to them without you expressing in clear English term or being very communicative with them that this is why I'm asking. I've had a patient that told me, shut up and do your job. And I can't get angry because these people are sick. They do not want to be rude to me, but they are sick. They are probably in their denial stage, right? So, how to address this situation? One of them is what I mentioned: check on their previous medical history. Secondly, try to educate these people. Some people do not know why you're asking this question. Some people do not know the dangers that MRI poses to them. I mean, as little as 0.09 Tesla, patients, human beings are exposed to over 2,000 times the Earth's magnetic field force. Just imagine somebody who's going into a 1.5 and a 3T, and the person is not being very honest with what is going on in their lives. It's You have to have empathy. You have to have the skill of communication. You have to understand that this person is not doing this because they want you to lose your job. They are doing this because right now this is all they know how to do. So addressing this situation entails you as a tech even understanding why they are getting that study done and desensitizing them on what the functions and benefits of MRI are towards the management of their ailments. Techs who do not do this, I've seen techs who get really offended. Techs who do not do this need to understand that we are making this money not because you know um, we are skilled. We are making this money because we are giving people a chance to live. So do the job, save life, and let them understand how you can be of help to them without you getting really carried away or angry over their presentation. Because safety can never happen without an agreement between you and the person.
I
Can
think
you
we face
can you hear me?
yeah, we faced a lot of challenges. But back,
Yeah.
so thank you for talking us through about the most common, safety challenges or misunderstanding you've, encountered in MRI and how they can be addressed. So the next question for you is, in your own perspective, as an MRI technologist in Canada, how does your role differ from MRI technologies in other country, if there are differences at all? And talk us through what are the unique or standard challenges in Canadian practice in the healthcare.
Um, I don't think there is a difference between an MRI tech in Canada and MRI tech in Africa. It's the same thing. It's the same expectations. If I'm moving from here to Africa to practice as an MRI tech, patient care should be the same. If I'm moving from Africa to Canada, patient care should be the same. I don't think there is a distinctive, maybe a minute with regards to the fact that in Canada there is a collaborative practice. You are not a jack of all trades. In Canada, if you're an MRI tech, that's what you are. You're not going from MRI to CT to X-ray to ultrasound. Like, you're not doing everything. You're specialized in one thing. That's what's not obtainable in Africa, where you are expected to do everything. And the other thing I would say is a little bit different is in Africa, people tend to disregard the radiologist a lot. They have no good understanding of how much power the radiologist has. Um, I've seen people raise a fight against the team of radiologists, and I'm like, you guys are not doing the right thing. These guys are gods in Canada. The radiologist calls the shot. You could have a patient who is supposed to have an MRI done now. You see this patient is like, this patient could code in the next 2-3 minutes. And the radiologist says, don't do the MRI. You can't do the MRI. Because again, if you disobey the radiologist, you don't have a right to read the study. So if the radiologist who is going to read the study is telling you the MRI is unnecessary, why would you, from your own discretion? So this is what I see most times in Africa. This happens in Africa. And the other thing is, I would say, like with the teamwork that happens here, I notice in Africa, a technologist is almost like working on their own. If you're in MRI, you're doing everything, you're on your own. But here, everybody has a job description. Like, if you're not a transporter, you're not a transporter. If you're not a nurse, you're not a nurse. You can't jump from your position to another person's position. And also, we have respect for every strater, every person, every status, no matter who you are, you're a janitor, that respect is there for everybody here, right? The clerk, I can teach them their job. If a clerk refuses to book in a patient, I, as an MRI tech, cannot influence that decision. I have to go through an authority over that clerk and say, hey, this clerk did this. And that would have been after I've had a conversation with this clerk, if they're relatable. But if not, I can't take a judgment against the clerk. Unlike in Africa, where people just can randomly act like gods and talk carelessly to one another, there is a respect in my system that I didn't see a lot back home. And about talking to other people randomly, one of the things I also notice here is nobody is above anybody in this system. Even if you start practicing as an MRI tech today, you are being regarded as somebody who has been practicing 10, 20 years ago. The only difference is something that is there's a bigger gap in experience and skill between you and that person. So you need to respect yourself and learn from this person. And lastly, I will add, MRI here is how do I say, with regards to equality, you earn the same thing that I earn. It doesn't matter how long. There is a cap to how much we earn. Back home in Africa, somebody comes in and the person can negotiate. If you have a sweet mouth, you can negotiate the amount of money you want to be paid. And you could get that if you're a very good salesman, But here, everybody has the same starting. Everybody has the same cap. If you're capping at $50 an hour, that's where you are. If you're starting at $43 an hour, that's where you start. If you're supposed to cap in the next 5 years, you're earning the same amount of money that somebody who has been there for 20 years is earning. So that's respect, that's equality. I see it so much in the Canadian system. And also, I said that was the last one, but this one I'll add it. One of the things I also notice is here, patients are also gods. Back from where I come from, a patient behaves in a certain way. You can walk the patient out. You can command the patient out as an MRI tech. You don't do that here. If you're uncomfortable with the presentation of a patient, you still do not have a right to work. You have to call security. So everybody works in a team. We know who, like, it's your job to protect me working as an MRI tech. So this patient is being disrespectful. I need you to come and talk to this patient. Not me saying to this patient, you know what? I'm done with you. Get out. You can't talk to me that way. And we respect people. If somebody says he's a man when he's presenting as a woman, you give them that respect. Back home in Africa, that's not obtainable. So the patient is the center of our job here, and that needs to be respected. That's the major difference I would point out. But again, the skills are the same. If you're an MRI tech from Africa, that's where you are in Canada.
Amazing, amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Rod, Ify, for telling us here about, as an MRI technologist in Canada, how your role, thank you so much for talking us through and how there's not much difference from you being an MRI technologist in Canada with other MRI technologists in other countries. Thank you so much for talking us through about that. So the last question
sure.
for you is, for someone considering a career in MRI technology, what advice would you give to them to prepare them for the field and specialize in safety as well? Talk us through.
Well, my first suggestion, because I can't advise somebody who doesn't want to be advised, right? So I would rather suggest that if you want to specialize in MRI, you have to be very empathic. You have to prioritize care over money because the money will come. But if you put money in front of you, you are heading to doom because you will miss the skills that you need. If you prioritize money, you will go to facilities where you don't even get to do much. You pretty much just get to work and you do a few stuffs and that's it because you just want to be paid. But when call comes for something very important, you're not able to function in it, you could get in trouble. Again, I'm making this with regards to where I practice. I don't know how it is obtainable in Africa, but when I practice in Africa, I noticed most people got into the field because of the amount of money they would earn when they present their CVs as MRI technologists. So prioritize patient care, be empathic, be compassionate, love people. If you love people, the money will come. I'm telling you. I have paid few people's exam, CMRT exam stuff, and it's from my MRI earning. They pay me well. I get paid so well. But I didn't start with so much money. And I don't have so much money right now. But I care, and that's why I could give because now I'm making the money. But I wasn't making the money like from the start. Okay. Now, the second thing I would say is you need to at least be somebody who is hungry for knowledge because MRI evolves pretty much every 2 3 years. There are newer trends, newer technologies, newer softwares. You must always be willing to learn new things. If you stand in the same place for a long time, the system will throw you off soon. They will vomit you really quick, because again, we see different types of diseases on daily basis. There are findings you will have in your MRI and be like you can't even breathe. They are really crazy pathologies right now. Of course, with the world being compromised with the gas and everything that is ongoing. So I would say prioritize patient care, prioritize learning, like learn, follow the trend. That's what I would say. And then I would say be very good with your pathology and your anatomy. If you don't have these sciences together, you will not go far in MRI. Because again, I remember yesterday, oh no, not yesterday, 2 days ago, I had a patient that showed up. It was supposed to be an epilepsy protocol, but then there was an additional request from the radiologist that says I should do a spectroscopy of the mesial temporal lobe. I have never ever encountered such requests before. And it was very late in the night. My brain was not braining. But then again, I knew where the temporal lobes were. So I did my maths and I could figure out the exact position the radiologist wanted this information on because he was very specific of what exactly he wanted. Now, if I'm not somebody who is hungry for knowledge, if I'm not somebody who understands that things are changing, requests are changing, I probably would have missed that information and I could get in trouble. So you have to keep learning. Technology wise, you have to be on par with what is going on. Then empathy, then pathology, then I mean physics, not so much. I wouldn't say that, but you just need to pass your exams. And on yearly basis, I want to plead with you, get your CPDs. And lastly, understand CPR. A patient could code on you. This thing is one thing that stands out for me. CPR or BLS. Understand it. If you miss it, get it again and again and again. Like, don't joke with these things. Because again, I keep giving examples in my experiences. I had a patient one time came in for I can't remember what study. I guess it was a brain study. And prior to giving contrast, somehow I was monitoring this guy, and I noticed he was jerking. Like I felt like there was an entire body tremor going on, and I'm like, what is going on? At that point, I knew I could perform some basic life support, but I knew I needed to call for help. I called for help. Thank goodness, every one of us in the hospital, we had that training. And you have to get that training, I think, every 1 year or 2 years. I can't remember, but personally, I think it's around 2 years. We got this guy out of the machine. We understood the signals that the body was giving because we have a proper understanding of what was going on. It's not just claiming to be an MRI tech, pressing computers and pushing boxes. No, you have to understand the human body. So we knew what to do. We knew when to initiate a code. We knew how to keep him stabilized before the code team came in. So again, prioritize these simple factors that I just mentioned. MRI is a lot. You can never stop learning. So if you're coming to
Absolutely.
MRI and you have plans of stopping along the line, well, don't even start because you are going to be challenged. I'm telling you, the challenges are crazy, man. Like people who've been here for ages are like, I haven't seen that before. How are we supposed to do this? I'm like, yeah, you were supposed to get a CPD and you didn't get it, So go get your CPD done. So yeah,
Also gets all the certifications as well. That is just
yeah,
very
absolutely.
needed as well. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Raji, for your time. She's a very busy person, and taking out time to talk us through is an honor to me and also to the audience as well. So we've come to the last session of this amazing mental chat with Rat Ife. So do well to watch this video to the end. And if you love this content, do well to like, share, and subscribe to your network. And if you're wanting to, connect with Rat Ife on LinkedIn and other social medias, um, you can as well, go over to the YouTube description below and connect with her. She's willing to help. And so, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Rat Ife Tanana.
Bye bye.
Bye.